Okay, looks like we are live and alive. Welcome everyone, Black Shoe Diaries post-game show. Patrick Kerbler not here once again. He's actually at the game today. So I'm Tim Maiden, per usual, filling in once again. Ellie Moretta Felice. Ellie, how are we feeling after that one?
Um, I came 7 points off the prediction that I gave on Wednesday, so I'm feeling pretty good. I know not to start too much of an off thread, but like it wasn't the 71 that Tennessee put up a week ago, but it was still 56.
Right. I'd say I was pretty close on my prediction. I said 52-3 in the round table. I was waffling on whether to give Kent State any points or not, but I ultimately felt like maybe they could pick up a field goal in garbage time but the way their offense looked today though, especially when their starting quarterback went down like third play of the game with an injury. I guess you could say it was a bad omen for Kent State in that sense. It didn't catch up though to them on the scoreboard until about midway for the second quarter. It was only a 7-0 lead for Penn State, and fans are getting pretty antsy because rightfully so. They believe we should have been up by more on the scoreboard at that point, and we weren't. You had a drive. I think the first drive of the game, which was very promising, looked like it was going to finish in the end zone, and then Bo Perbula on a trick play on 2nd and 1 decides to throw it was just an absolutely bad throw for interception, like directly in the defensive lineman's hands, and it kind of just deflated things for a little bit offensively. Even though the defense continued to do its job, Kent State, as we talked about earlier this week, they don't have any real playmakers, and it showed. And they even in garbage time, they couldn't do a whole lot. I mean, they finished the game. I'm looking at stats up here with 67 total yards. I mean, that's not domination. Then I don't know what is defensively, but
Really?
they were never really a threat, even when it was still 7-0. I was never really nervous or thinking that this is going to be a repeat of the Bowling Green game. And sure enough, the last 5.5 minutes of the half, the offense got clicking. Drew Aller especially was just throwing darts left and right and down the middle. And he ended up having a heck of a game. 309 yards, 3 touchdowns, 17 for 21 passing. Even had a rushing touchdown of his own. And then you had Nick Singleton, Katron Allen. While neither of them got in the end zone, they were consistently ripping off decent chunks of yardage. Singleton had averaged over about 7.5 yards per carry. Allen was 6 yards a carry. So it's a solid, consistent game from those guys. And I guess in the receiving department, of course, you had Omari Evans with his typical deep ball catch for a touchdown, and Tyler Warren. I think maybe we can talk about him separately in a little bit because he was like a human Swiss Army knife today. But another excellent game from him. Ellie, just your thoughts. Just how were you feeling when it was still 7-0 midway for the second quarter?
There's one thing that I kind of thought about. Obviously, I was not concerned that Penn State wasn't going to win the game. That, as we established on Wednesday, was basically impossible. I also was not concerned with the offense because it was moving the ball, and as you said, if it weren't for that Bo Pribula interception, they would have been on the board much earlier, and this game would have been over much earlier than it was. Um, there is one thing that I kind of realized that has been apparent, but not, I guess, as apparent as it probably should be. The way the clock rules changed last season and into this season have dramatically altered the way some of these games go. You actually even saw it earlier with Ohio State and Marshall. Uh, Marshall scored first, but their first drive took 8 minutes. So Ohio State didn't even get the ball before the first quarter was like more than halfway through. The same way with this game, even though you knew Penn State was going to get theirs, because of how quickly games move in 2024, I think everyone, the public's perception of how a college football game moves still hasn't caught up. So you're looking up and it's like halfway through the first quarter and they don't have 14, 21 points yet. Well, that's because the clock doesn't stop now. So you combine that with the fact that Andy Kotelnicki isn't going to go at hyperspeed all the time. He actually runs more of an offense that resembles Bill O'Brien and how he would speed up and then slow way down. Um, you combine those two things, and it actually kind of makes sense. Taken a quarter for the offense to get going because it's just you combine a slow offense that's deliberately slow and a clock that does not stop on the what we are used to um, from years prior, then you put those two together and it kind of makes sense. Um, I was encouraged by the fact that there were no like other than that one interception, Penn State basically played a perfect game. Drew Aller was 17 of 21, and two of those passes could have been completions. So the running backs, as you said, they neither had over 100 yards, but they are both carrying the ball at a good clip. This was the type of game that everyone, if you ignore that like first quarter lack of scoring, this is the type of game that we all wanted, and we basically saw it.
Yeah, it makes an interesting point about the new, the current clock rules, and now it's more NFL like, where first downs no longer stop the clock momentarily, except for the last 2 minutes of a half. And of course, now this year they've added a 2-minute warning. I guess, well, because I'm supposed to say that it's a 2-minute timeout, apparently, but whatever, the 2-minute timeout. Um, to, but even with that, you still, I'm looking at the drives here for Penn, the scoring drives at least. Well, the interception took 4 minutes, 8 seconds. The touchdown drive that followed that was 4 minutes, 41 seconds. And then the next scoring drive took only 2:36, and then 1:32, and then 44 seconds. So it's an interesting point you do make about, Koenig's offense isn't hyper speed, but it does not mean it is not. Of course, it's still very explosive, though. You can still be a very explosive offense without being a hyper speed, get the snap off as quickly as possible type of team. Like, we're not, like, it doesn't have to be like what Chip Kelly's Oregon offenses were back in the day. But
And that's not because they can't, right? Like as you rattled off the scoring drives in the first half, they are perfectly capable of not only going fast but scoring fast if they need to, which is something that they severely lacked last season, right? We haven't had to see them need to score fast or keep up with an offense. Um, if the Michigan and USC game that's about to end is any indication, uh,
are you
we
watching it right?
probably
I got it streaming on my iPad off to the side here. Michigan just, those of you not what Michigan just scored a go-ahead touchdown with 7 seconds left. They're up 27-24 and about to kick it off back to USC. So some high drama in Ann Arbor.
So like if you take that under consideration, maybe if you also consider that UCLA had LSU on the ropes for most of that game, maybe you start realizing that you probably won't have the opportunity to see Penn State in a position where they have to score fast until November 2nd. Maybe Illinois proves to be a much better game than we all thought. And it probably is, right? Like, given what they just did against Nebraska last night, that game is actually probably going to be right along USC and Ohio State, one of the best games that Penn State rather, has on its schedule. And outside of that, it's unlikely that that Penn State will need to go at hyperspeed, which means, given how they can just score basically at will, they can just go on, play their offense, play their huddle style to take as much time off the clock as they need, and just rely on that and trust that when they need to go fast and score fast, they can all do that too.
Absolutely. I mean, even though it was maybe on the scoreboard didn't show, but like I said, during, you saw they were able to move the ball from the very beginning, which, they should be on a team like Kent State, where I don't know if you saw them flash a stat during the game, but the average weight of Penn State's offensive line was almost 60 pounds heavier than Kent State's. I mean, so you would hope that the O-line would have their way with their D-line and give Drew Howard plenty of time in the pocket, and also make sure Singleton and Allen had lanes to run through. So, I think ultimately, even though it didn't show on the scoreboard for a little bit, you saw what you wanted to see. And by the way, I think the next big thing, Penn State broke a 98-year-old record for single game yardage, putting up 718 of them. The previous record was 711. So, and how that 718 breaks down, you had 309 yards on the ground and, wait for it, 409 passing. I think that means something, but I'm not quite sure what. But just all around domination statistically in this one, even if it took a quarter and a half for it to start showing up on the scoreboard. So in the end, this was, I think, the domination, the comfortable beatdown that we were all expecting. So, I think, you're feeling good about going into the Illinois game, which, as you said, that's going to end up being a tougher game than we expected in the preseason. That was a nice win they pulled out in overtime at Nebraska last night. So, it's guaranteed going to be the 7:30 NBC's Saturday night game next week. I wouldn't be surprised they call a student whiteout for that one last minute, because it definitely merits it. And we'll talk more. I mean, we're going to talk more about Illinois. Patrick and I talk about Illinois on Wednesday when we're previewing that. But today's performance, though, gave me confidence that they should be able to do enough to keep Illinois at bay. And I think it'll be a competitive game for sure. One that goes into the third, fourth quarter. But, today gave me some confidence that Penn State can beat just about anybody on the schedule, besides.
Absolutely.
So we talked about the offense, Ellie. We'll turn a bit to the defense. So, statistically, I mean, it was great. 67 yards of total offense for Kent State. They ended up knocking out their top two quarterbacks, so they were stuck playing with a third string, Tommy Ulatowski, who did not complete a single pass. They basically they kind of turtled up and just stuck with safe run plays and just trying to avoid any turnover. Not taking too many downfield shots. So secondary didn't get tested much. And the tackling is fine. It could have been a little better at times. And the D-line, they did a good job pushing around the O-line. Although, once again, my one gripe is the offsides. They're still way too twitchy on that D line, and I forget how many offsides they garnered, but it was probably at least 3 from what I counted. So I don't know
Yeah, 2
what
or 3.
I don't know how they resolve it at this point. I mean, or what Tom Allen can do to make sure they get less twitchy. But I've never seen a Penn State D line have these types of problems in a season.
It's funny because if I remember back to the blue and white game this season, we were all amazed at how quickly Abdul Carter was able to get off the line and get to the quarterback in that game, where things, for all intents and purposes, didn't count. Um, Little did we know that that would translate into offside after offside after offsides penalties. So it sounds easy when you're just talking about it, but like he just needs to slow down half a second. Like, just slow down half a second, and you'll be fine. Um, but you're right. There is. I honestly was not even looking into the defense in this game. I knew that they were going to dominate Kent State, and we basically saw that. There were some plays where their running backs were able to get some yardage, but you can't expect perfection, right? You're not going to hold every opponent to negative yardage, which is fine. But when it counted, they clamped down, and I think I had mentioned this after the Bowling Green game in one of the recaps that I wrote. There is a philosophical difference, and for us fans, right, it's going to be choosing our poison. We had Manny Diaz. Manny Diaz was very aggressive. They routinely backed up opposition, and they were able to get a lot of tackles for loss, a lot of sacks. But that defense, as aggressive as they were, they tended to give up big plays at the worst possible moments. This defense that Tom Allen is bringing in, it's not going to give up that many big plays. It's designed to stop exactly that. But that means that they're going to leave a lot of room in between, and opposing offenses will, and you saw it with Bowling Green, right? Like Bowling Green was not um, throwing bombs and getting 40-yard runs. They were, for all intents and purposes, thinking and dunking down the field, and it worked for a little bit, but then and that's going to be the fundamentals that we'll see moving forward. Going to, I don't think it's actually a Tom Bradley. It's more of a Brent Pry type of system where we're back to forcing opposing offenses to actually drive down the field, prevent plays, and you can't make a big play for a loss or a sack. But that's going to be the fundamental difference. And they did that today. They allowed some yardage gains, but when it mattered, they clamped down. And in fact, we're talking as if State gained 300 yards through the air and another 200 on the ground, but in 67 total, more than did what they should have. But what that means is we saw Altmaier throw the ball all over the place against Nebraska. If he has to do that as often as he had to last season, State defense going to make him pay, because all credit to him, he looks a lot better than he did a season ago, but he's still had erratic tendencies that he had last season. So that actually is a perfect opportunity for whoever is going to place to kind of get that opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point about how Allen's difference in Allen and Manny Diaz, and it's more it's kind of more of like what do you want? Do you want like a hyper aggressive guy who's maybe you're going to get a lot more sacks or you're going to come up with more turnovers as a result of all that pressure you're dialing up. And of course, the flip side is too, you're more susceptible to giving up huge plays. And it was frustrating at times. I remember when it would be like 3rd and long, should be a thing where you just get them off the field, but they end up like hitting a screen pass that goes 15 yards for a first down, or just they end up doing just enough to move the chains. And that's super frustrating. So, I mean, I think Allen's defense is more designed to not give up those types of plays. Like you get into a 3rd and long, it's a Tom Allen defense or, Brent Pry defense, for example, like, you'd be hard pressed to try to make it all up at one play and, not be forced to decide what to do on 4th down. So, by the way, speaking of defense, Michigan held up. They've won the game 27-24 over USC. So, little mini upset there in Ann Arbor.
Well, I guess all of the folks who had left Michigan for dead probably should slow down just a little.
Rumors of their demise have been exaggerated.
Yeah, right. I will say, not to sound too much like a hater, but this doesn't mean much. I'm gonna say that right now. What I learned is that USC is clearly not the number 11 team in the country. They're not the hopeless team that they were a year ago. They're certainly better. But now we're starting to see that actually the fears that people had when they were coming in and facing Big Ten linemen, both on the offensive and defensive side, that they were going to struggle. This is what it proves. And what I mean by this is this also doesn't mean Michigan is suddenly okay. They still struggled mightily in the second half to the point where USC even had the opportunity to come all the way back and take a lead. So I think
they almost won the game, but they had been 4th and goal, and Michigan had to convert a 4th and goal in the final minute to win the game.
Exactly. So probably what we're looking at here is 2 8-ish win teams that neither is actually going to factor in the Big Ten title discussion. And we might have given LSU and Utah State too much credit on the USC side. And maybe we didn't give Texas enough credit for what they did because Michigan struggled with Arkansas State, a team that just let who did they just got worked. I forgot who they're playing, but I remember the score was like 45-0. And likewise, Fresno State gave Michigan everything they could handle. So as the difficulty ratchets up for both teams, with the exception of Texas, I think this will bear out where they are just 2 good, not great teams.
Yeah, I think time will tell on that one. I will say that the USC game seems a little less daunting than it did going into today. Of course, the whole cross country trip thing is still a bit of a concern because it's just Penn has never done this before in the middle of the season, so you wonder how it's going to work. But again, that's something we'll touch on when we get to USC week on the previous show. So won't dive too much into that. But yeah, I guess final thoughts on Kent State. I think I don't know much more you can talk about this besides the utter domination that it was.
Yeah, I mean, there really isn't much you can grab from a game where even before we went in, we knew that it was going to be domination. It's just the question is like, how much is Penn State going to score, and is Kent State going to score? We learned what we learned. We saw Dejuan Lane. We saw him all, I think, up until the fourth quarter. That experience is going to matter starting next week. I'm curious to see who else they're going to rotate in. Sucks for Cam Wallace. There's no way that he doesn't have a long-term injury based on.
Yeah, that looked bad, the way his ankle got rolled on and how he had to be helped off, like couldn't put weight on his ankles. So you hate to see it. And of course, from a depth perspective, you were maybe counting on him in case something happened to Singleton or Allen. So now it's Quentin Martin, thankfully, healthy now, at least. So
Knocking on all the wood.
Knocking on all the wood. But Singleton and Allen done a good job of staying healthy for the most part. Like, I don't think we've ever lost either of them to a longer term. Yeah, fingers crossed, knocking on the wood. So yeah, that about covers it with Kent State. Maybe we can.
The last thing that I'll talk about, and then we can call it a day, is I was glad to see that a receiver other than Omari Evans and Trey Wallace caught a ball. Liam Clifford looks healthy, and I mentioned this in our private chat, but as now that he's healthy and he's actually being targeted, you can see why he got so much hype in the offseason. Yes. He looks like a completely different receiver than what we saw last season. And we even got to see how they plan on using Julian Fleming. And yeah, I think a lot of folks may have had hopes for Julian Fleming that probably were unrealistic. But seeing how they're utilizing him in this game and seeing how they plan to distribute the ball in the future, he's probably, if I had to guess, his season this year is going to look like the season he had at Ohio State. I think it was 2022, where like he had like 30 catches for 400 such yards. I would say that's probably what it's looking like. But the fact that there are 4 receivers that are actually reliable, that can actually catch a ball and that actually get separation is definitely a sight for sore eyes.
Yeah. By the way, I don't think we've mentioned Khalil Dinkins made his debut this season, and I think he's going to be a real weapon in this offense going forward. I mean, James Franklin alluded to it in his Wednesday press conference of the media, post-practice conference of the media. When Dinkins was healthy, and they're expecting him to be a real weapon going forward, and it showed. He got a touchdown pass from Bo Prabula in the second half, and I'm sure you'll be seeing plenty of 2 tight end sets with him and Tyler Warren in there. Tyler. That's another thing we didn't really. Tyler Warren. I mean, I mentioned before, human Swiss Army knife. He caught a touchdown pass. He completed a pass. I don't know if it went for a touchdown, but he completed a pass.
It went for a touchdown.
Okay, yeah. So I'm trying to pull up. I left the stats page, so I didn't have it up. But yes, he threw a touchdown strike. He caught a touchdown, and he also ran for 16 yards up the gut. So the only thing left for him to do, I guess, is to, maybe kick an extra point or punt or something, or just hear impressions of Tyler Warren. I mean, it's clear why he's Drew Hour's favorite target.
Yeah, I mentioned this again, something else I said in our private chat. When it's all said and done, Tyler Warren will come out of Penn State as the best tight end in the James Franklin era. And, obviously James Franklin will go to bat for his players, but they asked him at halftime, and he was bold enough to actually just say he's the best tight end in the country. And when you have someone as versatile as Tyler Warren, I don't know that I disagree. If he's not the best tight end in the country, he's certainly among the best, because there's few players who can do the things that he can, both at his natural role of tight end, blocking and receiving, but also just in all the other areas where he can be an asset. And the fact that he played quarterback in high school, doesn't necessarily hurt. And again, going back to the conversation we were having about the offense and all of the things it can do, that's just another thing that you put on tape for some opponent in the future to have to worry about. Because now Tyler Warren can line up at the in the Wildcat, and like, you can't just expect that he's gonna run. He can throw the ball, he can do whatever, because that's just the kind of player that he is.
Absolutely. It's I remember when he announced he was coming back for senior year, and how excited I was, thinking like, yeah, this guy's going to be a real asset in the offense, and just brings a real veteran leadership to that tight end room, which, especially like younger guys like, Luke Reynolds, who he showed up with a spectacular catch in garbage time, and Andrew Rapplier, hopefully he gets healthy soon. But those guys certainly, I'm sure, are learning a lot from him every day in practice, and just seeing how he carries himself on and off the field. So it's great in a lot of ways. And yeah, it's a pretty bold statement to say is your best tight end in the James Franklin era, considering guys like Mike Gesicki and Pat Freiermuth have come through in the past decade. But I could see it when it's all said and done. So, the guy's got to have NFL scouts drooling all over him. So, you're talking about a likely day 2 pick. I'd be surprised if he doesn't get picked up by second, third round by a team. He's going to be he's that good. So, I guess that's enough gushing over Tyler Warren. So, trying to get this to 40 minutes. We're at 32 minutes right now. Get you all your bang for your buck. So maybe we just talk briefly about Illinois. Obviously, we'll do a full preview on Wednesday, but we both watched the game last night, Illinois, Nebraska, overtime thriller. Just your impression of the Illini. I'd say just maybe their run game isn't what it's been ever since Chase Brown left for the NFL, but they've made up for it with a solid passing attack, and I think that's what they're going to be relying on for the most part when they come to Happy Valley next weekend.
Yeah, I will say we historically have made fun of a lot of teams in the former Big Ten West due to the kinds of games that they are wont to play. But this was a really good game. This was two teams who were ranked coming in and played like two ranked teams. They were basically throwing haymakers, and eventually Illinois landed the last one. I will say, before I get into Illinois specifically, a lot of people might see the highlights of Dylan Raiola in overtime, but he was really good throughout that game. It just happens that his freshman moment came at the worst possible time. That aside, yes, Luke Altmaier, I said this earlier, he looks a lot better than he did a season ago. They will need to improve in the running game in order to you don't want to get I want to be specific with this, because I was going to say you don't want to be one-dimensional, but then I thought about all of those air raid teams that are one-dimensional or are successful at it. But I'm not sure that air raid is what Brett Bielema had in mind when he started this season. But if it's working, it's working. So far, it's working for them. But eventually, they're going to get to a point where they're going to have to establish a run game, and that point might be next weekend, right? If
they're going to have to be balanced next weekend, like, again, when you're facing the Penn State's in your schedule, you can't get away with being one-dimensional. I mean, that 2021 game notwithstanding, I mean, you can't get one-dimensional against Penn State. They're going to have to, they're going to have to be good enough on the ground to keep them honest. Because if Penn State's able to swallow up the run game, then they can just pin their ears back and sell out to stop the pass. And while Illinois does have some pretty good receivers, I do think Penn State's got a pretty athletic secondary and can cause some problems for those guys. So it will be a very interesting matchup. And also now, as a consequence of Illinois getting off to this better than expected start, and they're almost certainly going to be ranked in the top 20 on Sunday, and now it's going to be a 7:30 NBC game in all likelihood. I mean, they're going to have Penn State's full attention, and I mean, I know they went into a pretty loud environment at Nebraska, and I'm sure it's pretty loud, but you walk into Beaver Stadium and it's a whole other level compared to Memorial Stadium, Lincoln. So, and if it's a student white, and if they're smart enough to call a student white out, yeah, have fun when your offense is backed up in your own red zone.
And let's be realistic. No one has forgotten what happened the last time Illinois came to Happy Valley.
No,
People are going to be out for blood.
Just get ready, Ellie, for a barrage of, the 9 overtime replay or just reminders of what happened, because that was also homecoming for Penn State. This will be homecoming next weekend. That was that was homecoming the last time when Illinois came and ruined things for Penn State. So the teams are obviously very different from what they were 3 years ago. And so it's just gonna, but we're gonna be constantly reminded of that. And I don't know, maybe because of how the game finished for Penn State, it may not be such a trendy upset pick, but I expect to see a few of these college football pundits making a bold prediction of Illinois pulling off the upset. That wouldn't surprise me in the least bit to see them do that. But I mean, spoiler, I think Penn State's going to win. Obviously, I'll make my prediction on Wednesday's preview show next week. But it should still be. It's going to be a much more interesting game than we thought it would be just a month ago. So definitely one.
3 more minutes.
We can end it now if you want. Unless you got something else to say.
I got a rant, and it's going to take me a while. So here's the thing. I'm going to go all the way back to 2014. James Franklin takes over a Penn State team that had less than 60 scholarship players. I think it was like 55, if I remember correctly.
It was at its lowest point
Yeah, it was at its worst. They had to convert linemen on the defensive side to be offensive linemen. It looked bad. 2015 came around and things looked a little bit better, but you could still tell that Penn State was bad. Then comes the breakout season 2016. They lose to Pitt, unexpected loss, even though Pitt was favored, so not really sure why it was unexpected. Then they get blown out at Michigan. Comes 2017, they lose to Michigan State unexpectedly. Comes 2018, lose to Michigan State again, unexpected loss. 2019, Minnesota, what am I getting at here? Penn State for the first like 8 years, not 8, 7-ish, 14 to 20, for the first 7 or so years of James Franklin's tenure, because Penn State did not have the talent and depth on its roster, they were susceptible to the random upset against a team that they theoretically had no business losing to. Well, you start with about the 2018 recruiting class. That's when Franklin really started stockpiling the talent. By 2022, you have a roster that resembles the upper echelon of the Big Ten. We're nowhere near talking about a roster that can win a national title just yet, but it's there. It's close, right? What does that mean? Penn State is currently at the level where these upsets against teams that they have no business losing to are going to be few and far between. But like the clock rules, people haven't caught up to that yet. So 2023 or 2022, what did you see? You saw everyone picking Penn State to lose to Iowa, to lose to Illinois. That was 2023. But 2022 was like to Northwestern, to all the like teams that Penn State just wasn't going to lose to. They were trendy upset picks. Last year, it was Illinois, it was Iowa, it was basically any time there was the upset pick. So now, in the same way, in 2024, before the season started, everyone's like, well, Penn State might lose to Wisconsin. Penn State might lose to X, Y, and Z. And I was like, no. Like, there's the talent differential on the 2024 Penn State team will only really be like overshadowed by the talent differential at Ohio State. And you could say Oregon, given what they've done over the past offseason.
But they don't play Oregon unless they get to the Big Ten championship game and face them there.
Yeah. So does that mean Penn State will never lose to a team that is not Ohio State or not Michigan? Of course not. But I think a lot of the trendy upset picks, in my opinion, are more wish casting than it is actually predicting what will happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because it's just, if you're going to say that Penn State can't beat Michigan or Ohio State based on the last two seasons, then you naturally will say that Penn State won't lose to any other teams based on the last two seasons too. So that's my rant, and I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, and on that note, Penn State, ever since 2022, from the beginning of 2022 season to now, they're 24-5. Their 5 losses were all but one of them were to either Michigan or Ohio State. Though one of their losses to Ole Miss in the what was it, the Cotton Bowl, Peach Bowl, yeah, in the Peach Bowl this past last December. So, I mean, it just goes to show you they're beating all the teams that they favored to beat. That I'm sure some of them were trendy upset picks, but they're not suffering those WTF type losses. Like, they seem to be good for one of those every year for the first several years, and now they're dispatching those teams sometimes with relative ease. So like I said, I think I told you my prediction. The roundtable at the beginning of the season was 11-1. Of course, that one loss to Ohio State, but that was just me projecting confidence that even though, they faced a few tough road games with West Virginia, they passed that test. They'll have USC and Wisconsin in next month. Granted, both those games, particularly Wisconsin, looking less daunting after seeing how their offense has sputtered. USC remains to be seen, but clearly today in their game with Michigan, you saw some warts of theirs pop out. So, I would still stick to my 11-1 prediction today if you put a gun to my head. So, but yeah, I'm just going to start going off on rambling here. So we've passed the 40-minute mark. So that's enough, especially for a Kent State game. So we'll end it here. Thanks everyone who stuck with us and tuned in for this live. Please, if you haven't done so, please go like and subscribe our YouTube channel. We're trying to grow the channel. Trying to get to 100 subscribers. Last I saw it was at 68. So trying to get 100. So Pat will do a show shirtless at some point. So that's our goal there. Or something crazy. It doesn't have to be shirtless. Something crazy is choosing. What was that, Alan?
As long as there's no shenanigans with a red Solo cup.
No, nothing involving eating doggy doo-doo out of a red Solo cup and live streaming it. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we'll see you on Wednesday for Illinois preview.